Welcome to another episode of Real Estate Stories with Ben Slater. This is volume 6, I believe, and today we're going to talk about how financially distressed properties affect both the seller and the buyer. Is that right?
Exactly, Pete. Great to see you. And as we talked about on previous episodes, the market's been shifting a little bit, and I sort of anticipated that we would see some short sales and bank-owned properties come up. And sure enough, I'm actually in the middle of a transaction where I'm representing the buyer to purchase what we call a short sale. And I get a lot of questions on this, so I figured I would explain the types of distressed properties and kind of what the process is so people can understand that.
Okay, great. Let's go.
So to start off, financially distressed property, what happens is the seller, if they have a mortgage, gets behind on their mortgage. And when that happens, there's a process that gets involved where the bank will eventually want to get their money back so it can go to what's called a sheriff's sale. Now, that's way down the road. And you have a couple steps before that as the seller. Well, basically, as a seller, you have three choices. You can, one, do nothing, which once in a while, that's the best option, honestly, because it'll give you time. You can stay in the house for usually a year, sometimes longer before the process goes through. But obviously, eventually, you're going to get booted out of there because it will go to sheriff's sale, it'll get sold. And the real downside of that is obviously your credit is totally destroyed for 6 to 7 years. So it's really problematic. That's your one option as a seller. Your other option is you can do what's called a short sale. If you owe, let's say, $300,000 on the house, and because the market shifted or you paid too much or whatever, the house is only worth $275, you can sell it at $275 and go to the bank through a process and say, look, we can't get you the whole $300, but we can get $275. And a lot of times the bank will approve that because it's in the bank's best interest in the long run as well.
Okay. All right, that's cool. So let's talk about buyer side.
From the buyer's perspective, a lot of times it's an opportunity to get a house that's possibly undervalued because of the fact that it is distressed and the bank wants to sell it. Sometimes you'll get it at a discount. Obviously, you're getting it for less than they owe. The only thing with the buyer's perspective is there's a process to the short sale. So you have to go through all the hoops and make sure you have enough time for the seller and their agent to actually apply for the short sale process, get the paperwork through, get approval from the bank. It's a lot more work for the realtors, but it can work, especially if you have things organized. So, and that's basically what I'm going through right now with this transaction. And it was a little involved because this one was so far along, it was actually scheduled to go to sheriff's sale, in which case somebody else could have bought it. So we had to appeal to the bank to get the sheriff's sale postponed so they could evaluate this current transaction. And basically, it's a pretty good deal for my buyer because they're getting it at a discount. And from the bank's perspective, they're already behind in the mortgage. It's been marketed. Obviously, it's not worth what the buyer owes on it. So the bank could either say, all right, we won't do this short sale, go through the whole foreclosure process, which is another probably year or so with legal work for the bank. So it's more costly for the bank. So a lot of times it's really a win-win if you can get it at the sweet spot. Like, look, the bank will take this loss, write it off, my buyer gets it at this price. And that's what a short sale is, which is different from what's called a bank-owned property, which is actually when it already goes through the foreclosure process. If nobody buys it at the sheriff's sale, then the bank gets stuck with it. So now the bank's the actual owner. So it's important to remember in a short sale, the bank's not the owner yet. It's still the seller. But the seller is getting permission from the bank to sell. And that's where we're at.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I guess it's the bank's cutting its losses a little bit. Are there any type of programs that the sellers can try to take advantage of to help their credit or maybe keep it or refinance or do something like that? Or are they usually just so far along that it can't happen?
I'm actually glad you asked that. They do have, and I have pretty strong views on this. They do have mortgage, they call them modifications for your mortgage. So as a seller, you can go to the bank if you're behind, and sometimes they'll strike a deal with you, and they'll say, okay, you don't owe this money. We'll put this on the back of the loan. We'll adjust your payments. In my experience, it almost never works out because once a buyer's in that situation, like just from a financial perspective, you need to get your ship in order. You either need to figure out how to make more money, spend less money, or maybe that house is just too big for you or too expensive and you got to cut your losses and shift. Because a lot of times with the mortgage mob, what happens is they do that, then they fall behind on that, then they owe even more money, so then they're definitely in a short sale situation. But there are programs for both, which is why I always tell sellers, if you do get behind, call me so we can figure out the best option. Sometimes the best option is to sell quick right away, and sometimes it's not even a short sale. But that's what I want buyers and sellers and people watching this video to understand is basically the three types of lingo you're going to hear. You're going to hear a pre-foreclosure house, you're going to hear short sale, and you're going to hear bank owned. And pre-foreclosure just means that the seller is behind on their mortgage payments. They still own the house. A short sale means the seller owes more on the house than it's worth, and they're trying to sell it for less than it's worth, and they need the bank's permission to do that. And a bank owned means the seller went all the way through everything, didn't pay. It went to sheriff's sale. Nobody bought it at the sheriff's sale. Got put back to the bank, and now the bank owns it. With the bank-owned properties, it's actually a quicker process as far as if you want to buy one, because the bank already owns it, and they kind of have their price, and it's just almost like any other deal, with a few wrinkles here and there. But
Okay. Do you find mostly that investors are looking for properties like this, or people just looking for a good deal on a home that they're going to occupy?
mostly investors, because there is a little risk. A lot of times with a bank, especially a bank-owned property, a lot of times the utilities will be shut off. So there's a little bit of risk involved there. With the buyer, you can't really do an inspection very well, or a full thorough inspection. So you're taking a little risk, and obviously risk reward, because you're taking that risk, you're usually getting at a better price with the bank owns. With the short sales, it can be investors, but sometimes it's regular mom and pop people. It's just the circumstance where, hey, they're selling this house and it just happens to be a short sale. So, it can work both ways. But the same thing on the short sale, a lot of times you have to deal with the banks. They might not pay other liens. So a lot of times they'll be stingy where, like, as we know, you have to provide clear title. So let's say there's a water lien on the property. The bank might say, we'll do the short sale, but we're not paying the water lien. So as a buyer's agent, you have to kind of anticipate that sometimes and come in and adjust your price accordingly.
And that's where a good title search
exactly.
comes into play.
Yeah, it's a process. But it's, like I said, they're coming back a little bit in this market. And sure enough, I predicted it. And I have buyers that are in the middle of one. And fingers crossed we'll get the deal. We're waiting on what's called bank approval right now, which means we submitted our offer. The seller signed the offer, and the bank is reviewing it.
Okay. Well, as always, Ben, Volume 6 has been chock full of great information. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you if they need more information on short sales or anything?
They can obviously message me if they're watching this online, and I'll get it, or they can call or text my cell, 610-348-0446, or they can go to my website, benslater@remax.com.
All right, great. Take care, Ben.
Pete, great to see you.
All right.